Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel, and my guest today is Benig Mauger. Hello, Benig.
Hello, Anna. How are you?
Very well, and very happy to have you here because you have one of the most evocative titles that I have featured here, and it is called The Soul and the Sea. So tell us about that to begin with.
Well, you're alluding to my latest book, The Soul and the Sea. People ask me that, how I chose the title. Listen, everything came through just organically for me, and I live by the sea. I wrote the book, as I say, during the first lockdown when we were confined to barracks, which in my case was no great problem. I was lucky enough to live by the sea. But the sea has been part of my life since birth and possibly beyond. And I feel that in a way, reconnecting with the energies of nature, but most particularly the sea, was putting me in touch with my own soul. And so when I was writing the book, and a lot of the book came through in dreams and walks by the beach and everything. The title just came through naturally because it's a soulful book. It's about healing and very much about how nature can heal us as well.
That's
So,
Yes, and I think that that is hugely important because in a world where we are increasingly cut off from nature,
mm,
uh, particularly in Western societies, and in which there are, it seems, immense pressures to disconnect us from nature evermore, whether it's through AI or the plan for everybody to be in 15-minute cities, away from the sea, away from nature. The pressure is huge. And there's been, and I think this goes back centuries with the very idea that civilization is something that is separate to nature, and that the more separated you are from nature, the more civilized, the more sophisticated you are. This is an old prejudice, and I resonate with what you're saying. Actually, we need to throw that out completely and utterly because we become sick the more disconnected we are from nature.
most definitely. When you say it's an old concept, it is, but it isn't the original. It's the patriarchal. It's probably 3 or 4 thousand years old. Before that, there was a different civilization and different way of being, which was more aligned with the goddess and the feminine aspect of life and nature, etc. But yes, I agree with you, and you made an extremely good point, and that's really the essence: is that the more we become disconnected, whatever, by whoever's hand or who's trying to do that, whatever, we do become sick. Absolutely. And Jung himself, I'm a Jungian therapist, wrote almost 100 years ago, man is in search of his soul. And and he has become disconnected, he or she. And so that is never more apparent, has never become more apparent than in the last few decades, really, or, the last 30, 40 years. And it's it's like going away from Mother Nature, and Mother Nature's rebelling, and we both know that we're in a state of complete transition, which the silver lining to it, to the difficulties, is hopefully spiritual awakening and a complete change.
So let's talk about water because, in fact, you were talking about this link with nature being very strong and preceding an attitude where the definition of being civilized increasingly is to be separated from nature. And it's funny because I've been in Devon, in England, for about 7 weeks now. It's a departure from our normal abode, if I could put it like that, temporarily. But one of the things that I've loved about it is that in the southwest of England, and I imagine it is the case also in Ireland, that connection with nature is much stronger than it is in the southeast of England, particularly in the London area. And the history of that relationship with nature is evident in the names of places. And water features so much in the names of places here. Just so many places named after wells, rivers, and streams, brooks. It's water features very highly in place names here, as well as hills and water. So geography defining, for there being a real interplay between the geography and the settlements that began here, with towns being at the mouths of rivers. So yesterday I was thinking, gosh, there's so many towns, from Sidmouth, Bournemouth, in Dorset, right through to Falmouth in Cornwall, the mouths of rivers. Relationship that is so long and so old between us and rivers. What do you feel is this link that we have with water?
I've never thought about it very much, but because to me it's almost like it's elemental. It connects us. Well, first of all, we're born, we grow in water in the womb, and certainly from a young depth psychological perspective, the water and sea and all that represents the unconscious, but also the great mother. And so I think it's just elemental. I mean, a lot also depends, I think, on your circumstances of birth, but also your birth sign. So I imagine, I'm a Capricorn, so even though I have this huge attraction to water, I'm quite earthy. And when I was giving birth, I was in the water, but I got out for the pushing stage because I felt much more connected to I needed the solid earth. So I think it's pretty, it's an elemental thing. And I think that for many people, for example, in Jungian work, I describe it in my book. I do a lot of visualizations, creative visualizations for people when they're wanting to connect for healing, healing from within. And we go in one of them, we go down to the bottom of the water, and we also go up to the top of the mountain. So each represents different aspects of our soul, and the water generally the feminine, and the mountain generally the masculine. But again, it's better not to completely it should be soft. It shouldn't say, well, I can't climb a mountain, therefore I'm not in touch with my male side. It's not like that. But you know what I mean? Generally speaking.
I do. And I am an astrologer, as many in the audience will know. So this is really very important, because when you say it's elemental, of course, that is the very reason why we respond to nature, because we are connected to the elements that are the essence of life. And as you pointed out, we start our lives in our mother's womb in water, and we are very largely made up of water. So water is really important. You also mentioned you're a Capricorn. This is the goat with the fish's tail, and in fact, it's something that I'm at pains to remind my students. This is not a goat; it is a Capricorn, and therefore there is that linked water. So there's something here that from ancient times a connection has been made between water and feminine energy, which has absolutely nothing to do with what sex you are. It's a nurturing energy. It's a flowing energy. It's an energy of sensitivity and feeling. So it's quite natural to me that you would be talking about connecting the sea and intuition and healing. So one of the quotes in your book that you were talking about when you were actually studying to be a psychotherapist is that one of your teachers said, she does very good work, but she doesn't know how she does it. To me, that's the definition very often of a good healer.
It was very funny because, I mean, we're going back 30, more than 30 years. And like that, obviously, I was just intuitive and using that in my work. And it's not that it was frowned upon, but it wasn't what they wanted, you know. They wanted you to be able to say, well, actually, I'm using this theory and this whatever. But my therapist was very connected himself he was a Jungian, obviously, and he said, yeah, that's perfect. He said, don't worry about it. He said, just, you know, do what you have to do, and when you qualify, you do your own work. So I feel that I've had that since birth. I've been probably undiagnosed psychic intuitive from the time I was born. And always connected to the land and always outside, and, you know, used to be able to, in my family, there's water diviners and all this kind of thing. So I was informed by the land and never really, you know, for example, I would always be with alternative medical practitioner. I wouldn't go towards allopath, you know. So it's something that's innate in me. And I feel that in this book, The Soul and the Sea, I'm writing about, because I've written other books about healing, but that this one is really, we can heal within. We have it within us to do this if we would only look within, which is countercultural, as you know. But now we've no choice. We've come to a place where we're running out of time. We have to stop looking outside and look within. I've probably gone off the point a bit, but it's really, really important to connect with ourselves, because the dreams will tell us a lot through our psyche, and we can work with that. But also working with the land and meditations, etc., etc. But knowing that we can do it. And this is hard because we're not taught that we can. You know, we're taught that, you know, you need to go here, you need to go and see the gynecologist or the obstetrician to have your baby, because you don't know how to do it, you know. Like, that's the idea.
Yes, there has been a progressive separation between, or let's call it disempowerment, which comes from the notion that everything requires a specialist and that we ourselves can't actually do anything. So
that's right.
You know, you can't even really sing unless you've been taught how to sing. And unless you're a professional, well, maybe if you're an amateur, maybe, you know, but it's, everything has to have qualifications. And to an extent, there is a need for that. It's the fact that it has become the only way by which we can function is to be an expert in something or specialize in something, which takes us away from our own inner power. And I think you're talking about that in the healing context, which is so important, because if we cannot take our own well-being into our hands, with perhaps help and guidance from others, then we are not just disempowered, we are weak. In fact, that is what it means to be disempowered. It means that we are weak. And I think that's something to really think about. Our ancestors were not like this.
No. No, and even you know, I look back, you don't have to go back that far. Certainly my family, we were a refugee, my parents were refugees, came to Ireland in the very early 50s. And, you know, I mean, the people weren't sick the way they are now, you know, because food was not as adulterated and toxic or anything like that. And people, I was talking about that with my partner the other day, about how his, you know, they lived like in Ireland in a lot of rural areas. The grandmother or the grandfather lived with the family till they died. And he remembers his grandmother well into her 90s, and she never went to the doctor. She just used to make up some gruel or something, and you know, had her healing ways. So I think in modern life, you see, and secular life, all of that has, on the spiritual level, because my book is also quite spiritual, it ties in the psychological and the spiritual, has separated us from our divine natures and from our essential natures, whether it's the divine, you know, within nature and our physicality itself. And maybe that's a cultural thing too, because in Ireland there was a heavy Catholicism, which was very oppressive, especially towards women. And we have a shameful history of the women, mothers and babies and everything. So I can't remember what you asked me now, but it's all about how we get. Oh yes, about the training. Very interesting you should say that, because I did my training in the UK, in London actually. And I started off there first couple of years, my practice in London, and then I moved back home in 1995. But 2 days ago or 3 days ago, I was leading a talk on the Scientific and Medical Network, to which I belong. And people were saying after I'd finished, oh, well, you know, we can't get people who are as trained as you now, and you've got all this different training. But someone much more important said, do you know what? It's all about if you just love the person. You don't have to be trained. So in a way, I totally relate to that. That doesn't matter how much training you have. It's the personal qualities and the ability of the therapist to be in their own heart. And that's why we have to be analyzed for years before we become clients, before we become therapists, so we can know our own. We must be the only profession that our training is in our weakness. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I absolutely do. And we were talking about astrology, and that makes me think about the symbol of Chiron, or
that's right, the wounded healer.
Wounded healer. And you know, this is about empathy. And in fact, I was going to ask you to say something about the link between love, healing, and therapy, and there you were already on that strand. So I agree with you. We know that the single most important ingredient in healing is the client relationship with the therapist, the doctor, whoever the practitioner is. There needs to be a real link, a real feeling of connection between them. And of course, that is very much about love. And so this is about compassion and empathy. And you can't train that into a person. You can't even, I think, with all the rigors of having gone through psychotherapy yourself, necessarily acquire that.
No.
It's people are either empathic or they are not. they acquire it through their own personal experience. Hopefully it deepens, develops, but and that's love, isn't it? It's the love that you have for the other person that's there in front of you, and that's a key ingredient. You're absolutely right.
Well, it's the book. Many people who have been interviewing me since the book came out. This, as I said, is my fourth book, but it's probably my most personal book. Have all said about how personal it is, and I was explaining that that's how I teach. I teach through personal experience and through processing it through me and out. So, oh yes, I'm very vulnerable in it, but that's okay. We are all vulnerable. And I think that, again, it's a bit counterculture. You know, in the old days, they talked about the bedside manner. And, you know, the old GPs would come and have a cup of tea, you know, and all of that. But now it's all on the computer. You know, they don't even look at you. So how do they know? Do you know?
Absolutely. And that is one of the reasons that I enjoy reading your book so much, is because it is personal. And again, I think you're talking about it being countercultural. I think you're right, because there has been a movement in therapy to make everything very cold and depersonalized.
Yes.
Because, and the aim is objectivity. But you can't heal in a clinical environment, an emotionally clinical environment. You can't, because you can't make the person feel safe. You can't make the person feel cared for. And you certainly cannot create a connection of trust. So I think this comes from this top-down attitude of we are the experts, we tell you what to do. And actually what's required is something else. I have done a lot of studying in this field, but where life is concerned, we're all experts. You are the expert in your experience, in your life, because you're the only one who's lived it.
And you see, sorry to interrupt, but this is the difference between, I suppose, that where Jungian therapy is different, being a Jungian, because there it's a growth model, not a medical model. So people that come to us are not, back to the wounded healer again. They're not our patients, so-called. That we're both. Jung used to say, it was purported that Jung used to say to people when they came, oh, so you're in the soup too. In other words, you're a mess as well as me, you know, kind of thing, which was much more equality based. And you see, the aim of the whole thing, and because I couldn't think of a subtitle for my book. I could not think of a subtitle that I was happy with. The publishers didn't have any ideas themselves. So I had called it Healing from Nature and Spirit. And then I thought, well, I don't know. And one night I had a dream. I had already written the book and it was with the publishers, but you know, they hadn't started printing it or anything. And one night I had a dream and I saw that, I actually literally saw the subtitle, Essential Healing for Everyday Life. And I sat up in bed and I punched out an email to them and I said, excuse me, I said, but I've got the subtitle. I hope that's okay. And they said, oh yes, it's much better than the first one. So the thing is that it's for everyday life. This is what we need to come back to ourselves. And okay, I'm an older lady now, you know, I've lived a long time, I've plenty more time to live, but I mean, I have grandchildren, etc. So you could say that that's wisdom gained by experience, but we do have to remember that we have within us all this wisdom, and we have also access to the divine when we need it.
And that's crucial. And it's an approach which is one, as you said, of being equals. And it's vital that that is the case if we are to help people feel empowered. And, you know, when I was training, because I'm also an analytical hypnotherapist, and when I was training, there was a great deal of emphasis placed on certain methods of induction, which did not feel natural to me because it was about shocking the person into a trance by virtue of the fact that you are the authority. And I always thought that was ludicrous, especially coming from a field in which we were being taught something quite the opposite, which was that we want to empower people and we want to have a relationship that's more equal. So it felt very unnatural to me to be doing quick inductions, which place me as the authority and you having to listen. Personally, that would never have worked on me. And so I knew this was not something I wanted to adopt in practice with my clients. So you're right, that vulnerability is there, because it's about sharing our experience and our knowledge, to help bring light when people are in a fog, and then helping them through that fog so that they can go off on their own and hopefully shed more light for others too. It's love, it's empowerment. And you have one of your titles or subtitles is called Trusting the Intangible.
Yes.
Tell us about
in the book. Yes, Trusting the Intangible. Well, that's right, and that probably comes at the beginning of the book, but I have it here. But that's because both love and, if you like, healing and all of that is in and I think I started with a quote from Rumi or something about love. It's a secret place. It's a place that you can't see. So it's like going to see. We used to go and see our supervisors, you know, and this is part of our training. But it's like you can't see. If someone says, "Well, how did this person get better?" You know, can you lay out the 6 sessions and the progression of what happened? No, you can't, because it's a process and you don't know how it happens, and it doesn't matter, and nor should you know. You know, it's like the mystery, the great mystery. And I also think that, and this is something I've written about more in the recent years, that healing is actually a mystical process. It's and connected with the heart, not up here, because you can go and tell your story over and over again to the therapist, and my father left me when I was young, and and you know all this, and you keep saying it, but are you healing? Are you healing? And yes, you can heal, but the healing seems to happen one day when you hear a piece of music, or you read some lines of a poem, or you gaze at the sea and something resonates. So these are intangible processes that just don't need explanation. They're natural. They're coming from the earth, aren't they? They're coming from somewhere elemental. And then you know you're healed, but you feel it in your heart. It's not, you can't say, well, now I'm actually healed. Yeah, I know about that. Like, it happened to me, and I wrote about it in the book, about what the incubator thing, that through all my therapy and everything, I was born very premature, under very difficult circumstances, and was not expected to live, etc., etc. It was an incubator for 2 months. And I knew all about it, and I'd been through the therapy and all that. But it was many years later when I was just climbing quite a high hill nearby, and I sat down on a rock and I just gazed out, and something clicked, and I said, oh yeah, that's true. Because my therapist had said, you don't need to carry around the incubator with you all your life. And you can hear those words. You can hear them and understand them. But then suddenly it made sense. Do you understand? So the process has to be trusted.
Absolutely. And, so often I have my clients say to me years later, if we come into contact again, they say, those words you said, they really started to make sense to me about a year later. And
Yes.
I thought, and I always think, yeah, good. They fell on fertile ground and then they germinated in due course,
Yes.
because it is very much a process. The work that I do with my clients, as I help them to process the events that caused whatever type of trauma they experienced, which is troubling them. That is the beginning. What I'm doing is helping them perhaps begin to see things from a different angle, a different perspective. We're reshaping that memory's interpretation, or the interpretation of that memory, bringing in an adult mind where there was only a child's mind before, to bring new understanding. But then beyond that, that's the light bulb moment. But it then has to be experienced as a feeling at some
Yes.
point. And it's usually because something happens. It might be just a simple, mundane thing that connects with what they experienced when they were with me. And the knowledge they acquired deepens. Because as we know, we can't switch off synaptic pathways. They can't be switched off. Neurological, we can't switch them off. So those old patterns of behavior and thinking can't just be switched off. What needs to happen is new neural connections need to be made and strengthened. And so what that's a process. It begins with, perhaps, if people are seeing us, it begins with what happens between us, but then beyond that, the strengthening, the deepening of that understanding is up to life and to them.
And also something going back to the start of our interview about the soul and the sea. And also here's where water comes in, because symbolically, certainly in dreams, water represents emotion. And if you need to feel the feelings, and you can have somebody who's cut off from their feelings, which many of us can be from time to time, or some people are a lot, might come through as you're skating. The water is iced over. It's not flowing. So I mean, I used to get recurring dreams. I haven't had them for a little while, of the pipes overflowing in my house. And I in the dream, I'd have to say, God, I must call the plumber in the morning. And I didn't know what that was. And then suddenly I realized, okay, what that is, it's an overflowing of emotion. Because I believe that even though I'm a Capricorn, I have Cancer rising, I'd be a very, very feeling person, very feeling. And so my work comes from there. So you're right. And the feeling has to happen. The tears have to flow. The softening has to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting that you were talking about your dream with pipes. Mine is tidal waves.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes.
So I am walking close to the sea, not necessarily by the sea, although that can happen too. So I can either be on a beach and I'm walking on the beach, or I'm sitting on the beach and I can see an enormous wave coming my way and I can't get away from it. So and I realized this is about feelings, which I'm trying to avoid, and it's not happening. I'm not avoiding them. I am feeling, so I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed is usually
Yes. Yes.
the meaning behind that dream. So yes, water crops up in dreams, linked with feelings, very much so. Well, if people wanted to find out more about your work, Benig, how do they do that?
Well, they can, the best way is to go on my website, which is my name, benigmauger.com, BENIG all one word.com. And there you'll see all my books. Well, my books you can order, well, particularly The Soul and the Sea, on Amazon. The others, some of them are now on Kindle, or what do you call that? Yeah, those digital ones. And but I have also I've started working online a lot more since the pandemic, and so I've got a membership program where I do online meditations and soul seminars. I've got one tomorrow, so do go on my website and have a look. Is the best way.
Perfect. And just to remind the audience, the book that we're talking about is called The Soul and the Sea. Benig, thank you so much for your time today.
And thank you as well. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all for watching. Next time, we're going to stay with the theme of connection as we talk about how to ensure that we are all creating our very own small town. Until then, goodbye.